Well, hey guys, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to my home, and welcome back to the Hug and a Mug series. I'm keeping it going so long as I have cute mugs to use, so we'll do a little moment for the mug. She's a pretty handmade, splatter painted mug, and I actually am quite dehydrated. I just took a very long hot yoga class, so this is filled with some coconut water and not with tea or any hot drink. But let's get to the topic, because the topic that I wanted to talk about today is one that I have been marinating for a while and marinating on for a while. And if you're watching this episode when I think you will be watching, it will be quite a bit out from when this stuff is happening in real time. But I kind of wanted to capture my thoughts in real time. So the topic of today is twofold. I want to talk about first the importance of setting the right goals and letting go of the goals that no longer serve you. I did a video a few months ago that had to do with how decluttering my home over the span of a year and letting go of things that I realized I just hadn't used, hadn't lived up to their potential, hadn't been that instrumental in my life, helped me realize that I had a lot of fantasies about myself, and a lot of those fantasies did not match reality. And in the meantime, I just had all this stuff that symbolized these fantasies about who I wanted to be seen as in the world, and how getting rid of the things actually helped me get rid of those fantasies as well and strip my life down to the things that actually are bringing me joy today, and also to the person that I am today, and the spaces that I walk in today, and the activities that I do today. And so decluttering was a great way for me to be grounded in the present and really figure out who I am right now at this intersection of my life, not who I am fantasizing about being in the future. And during that video, I said that just like things, we need to declutter ourselves and our lives of ideas that no longer serve us. There are ideas that we think are our own that we didn't even come up with. They came to you because you grew up in a family and you were raised, being told that you belong to a certain culture or a certain backstory, or, if you grew up with one parent, maybe that parent gave you a story about the other parent, whatever it is. If you grew up in the Northeast, you have a different cultural context than if you grew up in the South. I mean, everywhere, everyone who thinks they have all these ideas that are their own really needs to question the premises of their ideas. Because the reality is, a lot of the ideas you have are just ideas based on the circumstances of your life and the context of where you live. And you're holding on to these ideas probably for dear life and not even realizing that these ideas that you've sort of imbibed by osmosis and by nurture are keeping your life very limited. And they're also preventing you from making the right decisions for who you are today in the present. And so, just like ideas, I'm going to talk about one more concept in this video, and then we'll dive into it. And that's the idea of goals. I mentioned that your ideas and your thoughts are often not that original. Oftentimes they come from your family, your friends, your social circles, the geography where you grew up, the time you grew up in. There's so many things that influence your ideas. And it takes a lot of active work to build independent thought. In fact, it takes making an active effort to talk to different kinds of people, live in different kinds of places, challenge every single premise that you have in your mind, and rebuild what you think are your more original deductions. Now, goals are often things that also stem from those inherited ideas. If you have certain ideas about what it means to be successful in your life, you're going to set goals that align with those ideas of success. So say you come from a pretty well-to-do suburban family in the Northeast, and the ideas of success are people who have really big, beautiful, manicured properties and really, really high incomes. And maybe they work in big metropolitan cities, in the Bostons and the New Yorks and the DCs, and they have really high degrees, and they, they work really hard. You are likely, if those are the cultural notions of what success is, then you're probably going to set goals that are very much byproducts of those ideas, right? You're going to have goals like maybe getting into a particular college, entering a particular profession, making sure you can try to work at certain types of institutions, making sure you can try to have a certain kind of salary, and your goals are going to be based on that. Now, say you grew up somewhere else. Say you grew up in LA, in a town that is very creative and focused on, say, the film industry, and the people who are the most successful around you are the people who are the most attractive by certain standards of attractiveness. And they get validation for expressing what they consider to be novel ideas and garnering the resources to try to make them come to life. You are probably going to set very different goals. You're probably going to set goals that allow you to maybe look a certain way. Maybe your goals will be very image focused, based on body and face, and maybe you're going to try to find ways to also have your network be built so that you have connections in the industries that you think are most rewarded in that place. All I'm trying to say, and I just gave random examples from the two coasts of the US, is that just like you have a lot of ideas that come to you from the circumstances of your life rather than being 100% intrinsic, you set a lot of goals that you think are so worthy often, and those goals are actually as arbitrary as the ideas that you have, which were really just byproducts of your life circumstances. So this video is about knowing when to change your goals. And in similar vein, it's actually about how changing your goals and saying no to the things that were your old goals, but that somewhere deep inside of you, are not your current goals. How that is basically the highest form of self-love and courage that you can exhibit. I'm going to repeat that because I want to make sure you really hear what I'm saying. And this is just my thesis. Again, all these videos are just my thoughts on life. They are not set in stone. They are just one person on YouTube's thoughts, but they come with a lot of mulling over. So I'm sharing them in order to invite you all into a thought experiment and a dialogue. So the thing I said before is that saying no to the goals that no longer serve who you are today is the highest form of courage and self-love that you can exhibit. So we live in a society that is very, very goal-oriented. The goal-orientedness of US society is recognized around the world. When I was young and I would spend a lot of time in Asia, people in Asia used to think of the US as this place where nobody ever stops working and it's go, 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 and there's no balance. And so yes, in a country that's very industrialized, there's production goals, in a country that's very competitive to get into institutions, there are, competitive goals. You want to hit a certain GPA, you want to, take certain subjects and have certain extracurriculars. You're always setting these goals. If you're a lawyer, everything is like, or a litigator, let's talk about litigation, where everything's a zero-sum game and your goal is to win. And also the US is a very sports-oriented society, and there's always these goals of winning. Our government has become this bifurcated, two-party, divided, mess, which is just a goal-oriented machine right now. And each party has its own goals, and it seems like the ends define the means. And my point is that goals are glorified in our culture in a way that is really quite questionable, because a lot of things are not going to matter when you age and you're just a grandparent and you've retired and you've got your home on your head and you're just sitting around kind of hoping that maybe one of your grandchildren will think of you that week and come by and say hi, and you can't really use your whole body, and you can't go and hike up Mount Kilimanjaro even if you have the ability to now, and you are going to leave this planet, and all those goals you had, maybe you'll leave with a lot of satisfaction that you achieved them, but I think you're going to start to realize that a lot of them were very arbitrary. But I think the goals end up being signal posts when you're on your life journey, right? So when you look back and you feel, I did it all, I lived a well-lived life, and I'm satisfied and I can leave in peace at any minute, it's probably because you set the right goals, and it's not the achieving of those goals that's satisfying. It's that because you set the right goals, they led you on a path that is now leading you to look back on your life and feel satisfied with where you ended things. Maybe you wanted to set your children up to be more successful or more likely to be successful than you were set up to be. And that is a really lovely goal. If that is kind of your broad goal and it leads you to working through jobs that you didn't quite like, but allowed you to make enough money to help your kids get through college or have homes or have families, whatever it is, it's the fact that you saw your children seeming like they were set up for success that is making you happy. Not the fact that you hit a particular salary mark that allowed you to do that stuff. It's the stuff that the goal allowed you to do that you are satisfied about. So I hope you're starting to see what I'm saying. There's a difference between the actual goal, which is the end, and then the thing that goal allows you to do, right? The goal is really just a method to allow you to get certain visions actualized in the world. And I think when enough of these visions come to reality, there's a feeling of satisfaction that you really had a life that brought out the things that you thought were the most important. So, setting the right goals and letting go of goals that no longer serve you. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of times that I realized that I hold on to old goals for way too long, and why I think most of us are probably doing this and need to start Marie Kondoing our goals. So the first time it kind of hit me was after I got out of law school. I clerked for a year in New York City in a federal court, and then I had a little bit of time off before I started my first full-time job in a law firm in New York City. And since I had about 2 months, I thought it would be really amazing to travel to the Himalayas and try to hike to the base camp of one of the great mountain ranges in the Himalayas, either Everest Base Camp or Mount Annapurna's Base Camp. And in my mind at that time, I really thought that I had a lot of fear and intimidation about corporate America and whether I would be suited to it and whether I was smart enough for it and whether I'd be able to survive. And for some reason, I thought if I did this really, really tough physical feat, I would internally have the courage to take on this tremendously difficult professional feat. So I did tons of planning. I picked the Annapurna circuit because it was an even longer hike, and the base camp is even higher than Everest's base camp, even though obviously the peak of Everest is the highest mountain range. But yeah, so I picked Mount Annapurna and I watched all these videos on how to train your body for this trek and what kind of gear you needed to get. And I did research on different, tour guides and times of the year and all this stuff. And I set out to Nepal for a month. And during the month that I was in Nepal, I did a lot of other hikes leading up to the Mount Annapurna 2-week trek. And those hikes were also incredibly difficult. And I had a beautiful trip. I will say, it was an incredible trip. I hope to write a book one day that sort of talks about this journey through the Himalayas and some of the people that I met and stories that I learned. But then it got time to do the actual trek. And by the time I was doing the trek, my body was already kind of worn out from all of these pre-hikes. And I was in pretty bad shape. I was getting altitude sickness. Turns out I had some other sicknesses too, but I was really, really sick and I was just determined. I was going to push through to base camp, do or die. And I just needed to. In my mind, this was a goal that I have to make it to this base camp. And otherwise I'm not going to be ready for corporate America. On the morning that I was supposed to climb to the actual base camp, I remember I wrote an email to my mother super early. And you feel like you're on Pluto. You're at this place very close to the base camp. You're sleeping in sleeping bags in North Face jackets. And I remember we had Snickers bars that were just frozen solid. I mean, there's no food that can be grown up there. And you have to start a trek at 4 a.m. And it's very dark, and it just doesn't even look like you're on planet Earth anymore. And that's all very cool. But I remember writing to my mom about how cold I was, how hungry I was, how tired I was. And I remember at the end of the email, I wrote, I'm not so sure why I even did this. I don't think whether I made it or didn't make it to this base camp, anyone would care. It doesn't change the world. It's not making one iota of a difference in anyone's life. And I just felt like it was a cool achievement, but to be honest, it felt so arbitrary. And I get it. A lot of people like to travel to cool places and just do cool physical challenges for the sake of pushing their body. But I think the fact was that I wanted to make a difference in the law. And somehow I felt like, I wanted to make a difference in the world through the tools of law. And somehow I felt like there were certain experiences I needed to get in the law in order to make that ultimate positive change and make people's lives better. And so I felt like I had to be able to prove to myself that I could go and succeed at a law firm, at a demanding, client-oriented, deadline-oriented, perfectionism-oriented law firm. But to get ready for that, I don't think I needed to go to the base camp of the Himalayas. That was just something I spent a lot of money on and a lot of energy on. And I even thought it would give me the courage to come out of a relationship I was in that I was sort of too nervous to just extract myself from. And I don't know that it even gave me the courage to do that. I think a lot of interesting things happened on that trip, and I was meant to learn certain other lessons and climb other mountains. But it just really hit me that setting a really, really hard goal, if you don't have a very compelling reason and strong conviction inside of why you're achieving it, why you're trying to get that goal, it's gonna leave you a little bit unsatisfied. It's going to leave you a little bit unsatisfied. I think your goals should be so intentional because your energy in life is so limited. You have a limited amount of energy You have a limited amount of time, which means that you only have a limited number of goals that you can set. And so if you're gonna set your heart on a goal and try your best to achieve it, I think you should be really, really certain that that goal means something to you. Otherwise, it shouldn't be a goal. It should just be, something that you use for leisure, and we all can enjoy leisure time to time. But I'm talking about the things that we put our mind on and we say, that is a goal. That is something I'm taking active steps towards achieving. That is something that I'm sacrificing other things for in order to achieve. That is something that I am going to really develop a passion for. And this is like a good little joke, but I think the word passion itself, I once wrote a blog article about this when I was younger, comes from a Latin word, which is patuire, which actually means to sacrifice. And so again, like, goals require sacrifice. Passions are not just things that like liven you up and make you feel alive. They're things that you are willing to sacrifice for. That's why that root verb is patuire. So you should really think hard when you set a goal. Is this something I genuinely think right now is going to serve me? And why do I think it's going to serve me? Is it really necessary? Or is there another way I can get to the thing I actually want? And is this goal just going to be an arbitrary thing that I do, and then I can add it to the list of things I did in my life? But just know, everything you do comes at the cost of something else that you could have done with the same time and energy. So every goal has the opportunity cost of the other goal you could have set in the meantime. And make sure when you set a goal, it's something you really care about. So I came back from the Himalayas and I ended up going to this law firm, and I did what I needed to do. I proved that I could get into the firm and perform successfully at this firm. I don't think when I was at this firm it ever made me come alive. There were moments I felt really proud of myself where I feel like I went above and beyond and really impressed people who weren't expecting so much gumption from someone like me. So those things were great. But really, I think at the beginning of my legal career, I was really hungry to prove to the world that I had some capability. Like, I just didn't want people to ever think that I wasn't incredibly capable and intelligent. And a lot of those insecurities that I couldn't handle, I think they came from like a mixture of sources. I think being young, I always felt like I was gifted with intelligence, and I wanted to maintain that image to myself of being perceived as a very intelligent person, because I think I felt like if I didn't have that, like what else do I have? This is how I used to think at the time. So maintaining that image of I am an intelligent, competent person was very important to me internally. And I think it was something I felt was important for the external world. And this is going to get a little bit personal, but I think there were a lot of sources of shame in my life when I was growing up. One of them was the fact that I had a South Asian family that had a big divorce that had sort of smeared it early on in my life. And it wasn't a common thing in South Asian culture at the time it happened in my family. And I always felt like we were a little bit like the black sheep in our South Asian community. And I think I felt that being accomplished and intelligent garnered a respect that mitigated the shame of the broken family. And in very similar ways, after 9/11, which happened when I was in middle school, I felt like my religion and my culture were all under scrutiny. And even though I had never felt like I had fit into any of my school districts that I had been in before 9/11, just by virtue of looking different and having an immigrant family, after 9/11, that was so heightened that being perceived of as smart and accomplished and respectable was just an absolutely imperative goal. And so a lot of the things I was trying to do in the law were just things that would allow me to feel that the rest of the world perceived me as smart, intelligent, capable, and respectable. But they weren't actually oriented towards, this is what I want my contribution to humanity to be through the tool of the law. They were just goals that were like the mini goals. Like the goal is, I want people to think that I'm intelligent and smart because there is this narrative of what Muslim people are like based on global events that I felt was just quite belittling and undignifying, and I wanted to feel like a dignified, respectable person. And so there was this need to be perceived as put together, poised, articulate, intelligent, all those things. And it led me to just picking things in the law that I could achieve that I believed had respectability attached with it. And if there were certain things that I felt would have respectability attached with it, but they were things I couldn't do early in my career, then I wanted to do the things early in my career that would allow me to do those respectable things later. Because me doing respectable things, things that were perceived by the vast majority of Americans and by the legal profession as respectable, was part and parcel of how I felt I could maintain my position in society that wouldn't be filled with shame. And so I embarked on this legal journey where I was applying to jobs that I did have an intrinsic interest in, but they always had to have that like respectability tied to them. It couldn't just be something I was interested in for the sake of the area of law being intrinsically interesting. And so it led me on this goose chase of really renowned law firms and really coveted federal clerkships. I ended up doing 3 federal clerkships, one with a federal magistrate judge, one with a district judge, and one with a circuit judge. And I also spent time in 2 big New York City law firms and one at a pretty elite like trial boutique in Denver, Colorado. And all of these things were incredibly hard to get. Just like hiking to Annapurna Base Camp while I was very physically ill and tired was no easy feat. But I will say, not all of these experiences were equally fulfilling. They were all great in terms of their brand names and building me up again to be perceived at first glance as an intelligent, competent person. But I never felt like I knew what they were leading towards, because they would just lead to another respectable, even the next level of difficult to get. Like when you do a couple of really difficult things, it's kind of like Malcolm Gladwell's book. Suddenly you have the prerequisites for even more coveted and difficult things. So they were always opening very exclusive doors to more difficult, coveted things. But I just felt like they were on like their own path of like difficult, coveted things. And it's just like a path of difficult, coveted things. And people get very impressed when you get these. And that's kind of what I always wanted, right? I wanted something where people would like hear what I do and they would be impressed with me, because again, I don't think I ever felt when I was young and growing up in this society as the daughter of these immigrants who had had a broken marriage, and I didn't really have much family out here, like my feeling a part of the society, my feeling beloved, was something I could take for granted. I always felt like it was something I had to earn. And that's still something that like I'm trying to dismantle in my mind as a young adult now. So, one of those 5 jobs, and I'm not gonna get into which one it is, because I do want to be discreet. But one of those 5 jobs was one that I had really dreamt of when I was in law school. And I had tried over the years to get that kind of opportunity multiple times. And it never came through, and then I finally got it. And when I got it, I made so much sacrifice for it. So much sacrifice for it. And I remember in all of those jobs, which required me basically to move to a new zip code every single year for the first 5 years of my career, and then coming here to Michigan was the 6th move. So 6 years, 6 zip codes, just imagine that. All in the pursuit of wanting to be perceived of as intelligent. And I'm not saying that I'm not actually intelligent, but again, I talk a lot about the motivation behind things in this channel. And intelligence is a bit subjective, but needing to be perceived of as intelligence is a motivation. So one of those jobs was so not just like uninspiring, but it was such a letdown. It was like I had held this thing on such a pedestal for so many years, thinking that it was the thing that was going to make me feel so intelligent and so special. Like I achieved this very difficult feat, and it was nothing like what I expected. And I was never more depressed in my whole life, and I never felt more misunderstood than when I was in what should have been like my dream come true. And I just wanted that experience to end. I did not think that the chemistry was right. I did not think the respect was right. I think it really just was not the right fit. And what I had envisioned it to be, based on things I had tried and tested in law school, and what it actually was, were quite different. And I got through that experience, but it taught me again a similar lesson to what I had learned when I went to the base camp of the Annapurna Trek. And that was that when you have goals that you put on a pedestal years before you achieve them, you often have actually an idea, a fantasy of what that goal is that you have put on a pedestal. And it's because there's something else that you're yearning for, right? Like you're yearning for that perception of being very intelligent, or you're yearning for some sort of validation or association. And the thing itself is not actually that innately satisfying or fitting to who you are. And so you're chasing, and it's very hard. It's very hard to not, like, it's hard to reconcile when you're in a situation where you've gotten the thing that you've been chasing, and the thing that you're chasing is not turning out to match your fantasy of it. I'm sure many people can relate to this in the context of relationships. That's why I'm smiling, because just thinking about the parallels that I think this can have with relationships is kind of funny, because I think I can think of lots of TV shows that tend to show this phenomenon of someone is like obsessing and dreaming and idolizing someone, and they're chasing them and chasing them and chasing them, and when they actually have them, they're like, I didn't imagine it like this, because you had a whole different fantasy playing out in your mind of like what that person would be like. And yeah, similarly, I think it's very dangerous to have these career goals that are very rigid, that are based on past fantasies. What I think is more important is for you to really do the dissection and figure out why. What's the why? Why is it that past me had thought this was the thing I needed to achieve? There's a reason that this thing appealed to me. And there's a reason I set my sights on this. And it's probably a mixed thing. It's never like reasons are just one dimensional. So there could be, yes, I want people to perceive me as accomplished and intelligent, and that's not a bad thing in and of itself, within reason. But that has to do with other things too. Is it because you have an insecurity that is never actually going to be cured, no matter what things you achieve, because that insecurity lives inside of you and you don't feel whole and perfect as a human being and like lovable and worthy of respect on your own without these kinds of feats? Because that feeling's always going to be there if you don't resolve it. And is it because you've imbibed shame that you never needed to imbibe? Like things that were happening on the world stage made you start putting yourself into a stereotype that you never needed to ascribe to yourself? Because again, you need to then reconcile that and find a way to walk around on the planet with your head held high. And is it a goal that you wanted because you wanted to feel safe in the financial sense? And are there no other ways that you could get to that feeling of safety and security? Is it because you thought people would love you once you did quote unquote honorable and noble things? And have you found other ways to cultivate love in life? And what has it actually taken in the moments that you have felt real love from your friends and your family? Like, what were the things that made you feel loved by them? And I bet you it wasn't your achieving of honorable and noble things. But my point is you have to really go back, because there also is probably a mix. There's probably a couple of different goals that could have achieved this thing, fill this void you were trying to fill. But you picked that one because you thought there was something about you that probably suited that goal. And so you want to make sure you can both think of like, what were the sort of reasons driven from fear and insecurity that led me to thinking I needed to achieve this kind of thing generally? And then what were the skills I thought I had that made me think that this particular job or this particular institution or this particular brand would do that thing? And I think it's so important to do that exercise, because probably you can then go back and think, okay, well, a few years ago, that past version of me thought that like certain skills that I think are used in this job would be suited to me, but that was all a hypothesis, right? That was before you did the task. And also, we're capable of so many different things in our lives, and what we enjoy in 1 year does not have to be what we enjoy 5 years later. So you can look back and you could say, oh, it's because when I was in law school, I really, really loved reading. I loved reading all the cases for classes, and this job involved a lot of reading, and everyone always said that I interpreted cases well, and so I thought I'd be good at that. Like, that's one example. It could be the same thing with numbers. It could be the same thing, and then you think back and you're like, did I actually like this thing that much? Like, if I wasn't in this program where everyone's doing it and being good at that thing is like the path to the top. Like now, all these years later, when I'm sitting at my home, do I like reading? Do I go through books fast? Do I go through books slow? Do I prefer watching things on a visual format? Do I prefer oral discussions? I think you have to go back and you have to say, like, were the skills I thought I had really ones that I still think I have, and ones that I still want to be doing in a high amount, or have I moved on? And so this thing about letting go of goals is so important. And you have to be able to let go of them whenever. You have to be able to let go of them whenever. So that could be when you're on the cusp of achieving them. That could be when you've achieved it and you're in it and you're feeling it and you're like, this isn't it. This isn't it. And I'm not saying you have to rush and like undo things dramatically, But you have to really be honest. You have to be honest. And again, a lot of the things I'm talking about with regards to jobs can apply to relationships too. I think it's very much so that people think they need one kind of love at one time in their life, and they find it, and that people end up growing in different ways. This is the game of life. This is how things happen. So letting go of goals. So here is how we let go of those goals, because I'm not very good at doing this, and I decided to make this video after I think I kind of did it for one of the first times in my life, at least professionally. I think I've done it in my personal life a few times, and maybe I'll open up to some of those topics on this channel. Really, I'm trying not to make it too broad and all over the place, but I'm happy to talk about personal lives too, to the extent that professional and personal lives intersect in a lot of similar ways. So, I said at the beginning of this video that setting goals is often considered a very noble thing to do. We admire people who set goals and achieve them, even if they may not have been that introspective at the time they were deciding what goal they were going to set their heart on. And it's for some reason in society, we admire the achievement of goals. I think achieving a goal often only shows a limited set of skills. Again, to me, picking the right goals in the first place and really thinking hard about what goal is the right goal for you is so much more important than someone who just achieves a lot of goals and tends to be married to this image of being a high achiever, but isn't thoughtful about what goals they're setting. I think setting the right goals and having fewer of them is far more admirable than just setting a bunch of goals willy-nilly. But then also, what I think takes even more courage and even more self-faith and self-love and self-reliance is being able to let go and walk away from the goals that you achieve or are close to achieving that you realize no longer serve you. So in the context of jobs, this happened for me over this last year, where about a year ago, I knew I wanted to leave the job I was in. I didn't see a future for myself in the particular institution I was in. And I also didn't see a future for myself in the location that I was in. The kind of work I wanted to do just didn't exist. And so I had learned a lot of fantastic skills, but there was nothing that was enticing me to push myself to the next level. And then I had ended up in this location for this job. And most of the people that I really love in my life don't live near me, and it's very hard to have a full life where I can't even see the people I love the most in the world regularly. So yeah, I had pleasant people I worked with. I had interesting problems to solve. It was a hard job to get because I always pursued very difficult jobs, and I had made many friendly acquaintances and hobbies, but there were bigger things that were just missing in my life and in my heart. And I felt that sense of heaviness for a whole year. And I had started decluttering physical stuff, because I made another video, you can go watch it, about how that felt like a way of having control on the nebulous process of figuring out what's next. But honestly, it was the best thing I could have done, because when you go on the job market and you're just looking for things to apply to, you end up doing what I was talking about earlier in this video. You end up finding the things that are like the next little push. They're that next hard to achieve, hard to catch thing that's slightly difficult, slightly ambitious, it's a little reach for you, but it's in your line of work. And if you apply to really random things and you start striking out, that can be really freaky, and trust me, I've done it. But what ends up happening is every single time you read a job description, you are going to have the fantasy brain start going off, right? So the fantasy brain starts imagining a particular city in a particular role, and you doing a particular task in that role, and how people will look at you and talk to you when you're in that role. Like, you start having this movie going off in your mind every single time you read a job description for something that you think you'll apply to. And then you start asking yourself, hey, do I think I would like that? Could I learn that? How would people perceive me if I did that? What doors would that open? You're living so far in the future. And you're now trying to like fit yourself into this fantasy you've created. And so your goal of getting there is, again, fantasy driven and externally driven. It's based on these external perceptions. The decluttering process was the exact opposite. So the fact that while I was applying to jobs and thinking about all these different fantasy futures, I was in the real moment getting rid of things I had bought that had not been used, handbags that had not been used, suits that still had tags on them, cooking utensils that I never really unwrapped and tried to use, and just so many things, whether it's sports equipment, cooking equipment, decorations, whatever it was. I mean, I could just see it all. And so I was seeing the proof of all the fantasies of myself that I had generated in the past that had not come to be and just had never matched the present. And letting go of that stuff, it was like, oh, like 4 years ago, I thought my life would look like blah, 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 or I wanted it to, so I bought this gown and I bought this. And I could think of the things that made me happiest because those were the things I did not want to let go of. Those were the things I wanted to hold on to because they still gave me joy. They were the clothes that I wear the most that I know I feel good in. They were the instruments and, maybe it's the tennis racket that I know I always pick up and play in the summer, and, the headphones I use to go on runs and stuff like that. So you start getting a very clear sense of like who you are today through decluttering versus just applying to jobs is putting you back into the fantasy future self, and is very easy to enable you to apply to the wrong jobs and set the wrong goals, because then you're setting goals based on a fantasy projected version of yourself instead of the reality of who you are. And so the crazy thing is, some of the jobs I applied to were things that were feeling like they were dangling and they seemed so exciting now. And some of them were things that I had also wanted since back when I was in law school. They were the things that you knew were revered in the legal profession. They were the things that when you go to the alumni nights, these are the things that people who are the esteemed alumni who get the awards that they've done. And so they were the things that people in New York and people in the legal profession and people who have like really risen to the top of the legal profession, and I mean the tippy top, they were opportunities that were in those realms, and the kinds of things that I kid you not, like, people don't say no to these opportunities. I've read a lot of books, and like some of the institutions that I was getting the opportunity to now potentially join were things that I had dreamt of for years and thought I could, like, maybe once in a million years, if I really planned all my steps correctly, get the chance to do. And now they were at my doorstep. But the problem was, through decluttering, through experiencing severe loss earlier in the year, and through feeling like a lot of real love in the last year too, real love and real loss, and having done this a few times, having had the experience of having poured all my energy into goals related to coveted opportunities, and having the data of how that could still feel unfulfilling if certain other things in my life weren't lined up. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew that like this was going to be like the crossroads where I would either have the courage to get off the Golden Star goal-oriented path and focus more on figuring out the right next goal, or I would just take the filler goal and it would probably hit some boxes, but I would probably still have a lot of emptiness because there would be other things that would be collateral. And when I was younger and I was really ambitious, like I said, I wanted to do all these clerkships and I moved all over the country for different firms and different opportunities with judges, and even came out here. Like, I've lived in so many different states. At that time, those goals seemed so important to me. And there were certain friendships and relationships that those goals cost me. And I am very fortunate to be someone who loves to write and journal and do poetry and songs, because I can read my own writing and see where I sometimes question my own decisions and have regrets about whether the goals I picked were really the right goals that would lead to my ultimate happiness in life. And so there was this piece of me that was very scared. It was very scared that if I just went to the next achievable, coveted opportunity that few other people could have, that would make me feel like permanently and forever respected and enshrined in the eyes of other people, I would never learn how to have the courage to act in a way that was in line with my heart, which knew that the goal had expired. The goal had expired. The goal I had once set that I thought would be the means to an end was no longer what heart of heart I believed was the goal that would lead to the end I wanted. And just because I could get it now doesn't mean that it's the right thing for me. And people will never even know. And I don't know if I'm gonna mention on this channel or not, like what those specific things are, but most people will never even know that I actually came within a hair's breadth of taking those opportunities and that I achieved them and made it through the different rungs. But I know that, right? Like, I know that I had the ability to take those things, but that instead I said, no, I need to first pause and make sure I'm actually pursuing the right goal, because these goals are going to take a lot of energy and they will come with a lot of sacrifice. And there's only so many things you can achieve in one lifetime. And I have these other desires, and I don't even know if they're far-fetched or not, like trying YouTube, wanting to write a book, wanting to put out music, wanting to explore love in certain ways, wanting to live in certain places, wanting to build things, wanting to revisit people I've lost touch with from my family, wanting to look at other countries in a new light, wanting to re-examine history, wanting to figure out what kind of future life I want to live, what kind of home, where is it going to be, do I want to have children, how do I want to raise them? Like, there's so many questions I want to re-examine. And I think until I re-examine those, also, like, what do I now actually want to do with my law degree? Like, how do I want to use it? It's a tool. It's an amazing tool. A law degree is an amazing tool. There's so many things you can do with a law degree that in this country you can't do without it. But it's not the only tool. Other tools exist too. Business is an amazing tool. Medicine is an amazing tool. Technology is an amazing tool. Empathy is an amazing tool. Humor is an amazing tool. YouTube is an amazing tool. There's a lot of amazing tools. Law is one of them. But I think I need to figure out what I want to do with that law degree for society and work backwards to figure out the right goal, instead of just always taking jobs that serve my childhood goals of wanting to make sure the world thinks that I am smart and capable and intelligent and respectable. And I think the fact that I was able to interview and get offers from these coveted institutions that I idolized for so long should at least convince me that I'm smart and capable and coveted and, respectable. And that should be enough, because I know that to be the truth. It doesn't matter if other people do or don't believe that. They're all going to be dead one day under the earth, just like I will. But I know it. And I feel like in knowing it, I can now let go of it. Like, I can let go of it. It's like that insecurity I had is kind of not really there, because I have proven to myself I have that capability, but I don't want to pour all my energy into it, because it might not be the thing that leads me to having that fulfilled life that I can look back on and say was the ride of a lifetime. So it has taken an immense amount of work and courage over the last week to one by one say no to jobs that were really, really hard to get. They didn't just take this whole year of applying and interviewing. I would say it was like 10 years of planning. It was like the stuff I started when I was in my first year of law school, and even the seeds I planted before that in my life and in undergrad, that led to some of these things coming to fruition now. Like, these are the kinds of goals that have taken over a decade to come to fruition. They're not small and easy. And to say no for the first time in my life feels like very similar to what I said in my video about picking a lower law school on a full ride over a very highly ranked law school. It's a forced act of self-love, self-faith, and self-reliance. And I don't know where it will lead. That's what's so scary, is like, I'm just trying to take that first step and explain to you guys what my logic is, because I think this is really true. When you have the ability to say no to something, even if it's something that so many people respect, that you've worked really hard for, but that just isn't right, it takes so much courage. It takes so much courage and love for yourself to do that. It also sometimes is love for other people, because other people deserve, it's kind of like in love when you sometimes realize that someone is not the right fit for you and they're a wonderful person. It takes so much courage to walk away from something that is easy and seems so right. But if you have that nagging feeling, the back of your mind, the back of your heart, you have this doubt that this may not be it. You don't have conviction. You're not sure it's the right goal, and you're using it like a filler. I think don't do it. I can't use myself as an example because I'm just at the beginning of this journey. Although, like I said, by the time you'll see this video, it'll probably be a month or two down the road. But I really think that being true to yourself is like the answer to so many of life's problems. You have to be true to yourself. You can't betray yourself. You can't betray your soul and your heart. Like I said this in another video, you can't You can't like fool your body. You can't hack it. Your body knows you. Your essence knows you. Like, you can't fake being the kind of person you're not just to impress other people forever. You will be empty and exhausted in your heart of heart. You will. You will never feel content and light and smiley and happy and free so long as you are not living true to yourself. And so when you have a feeling in the back of your mind, in the back of your heart, that a person isn't for you or a job isn't for you, even if you had your heart set on that person, even if you fantasized about that person, and even if that job took years and years and years to achieve, and you jumped through all the loopholes and or all the hurdles, and so few people could, if it doesn't feel in the moment that you're in right now, like you are certain that that is a worthy goal, that you think is something that will lead you to the things you want, that you think you want in your life, where you are today, then I think it takes a lot more courage and faith, but it is a lot more noble and a lot more self-respecting to say no. And wait, because things can change. But wait until you feel that the answer is yes, and it's clear as day. And then you act on that one. So that's my little lesson slash chit chat for today. I know it's one of our longer talks. I love having some of these longer ones. That's just my style. But you guys tell me what you like, and I hope this was helpful. If any of you are out there and you're struggling between what you feel like you're supposed to want and what something inside of you kind of actually wants that you feel too scared to express, I hope this empowers you to know that a lot of us struggle with that, and that there are people who occasionally do decide to honor themselves and to take that chance. And you can do it too. You really can. Most of the times things do work out, and they'll probably work out better if you're true to yourself. All right. That's what I got for today. I hope you have an amazing day. Please do tell me if any of this resonates with you, because I would love to know. And I will catch you in the next one. Bye.